Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to episode 24 of the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's kind of hard to believe we've been doing this show for almost a year, and this is the first time we've actually had a show dedicated to security and cloud computing. So today we're honored to have Rand Wacker, VP of Products from CloudPassage. Rand, how are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having us. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. So give us a little bit of your background and some of the basics of what's going on over at CloudPassage.
Yeah, definitely. So my background's actually in security as well. I was with the Ironport security team for a long time. We had a big acquisition by your employer. And after that, we actually were involved in all the broader network and content security stuff that is very, very common in any IT security shop. And the interesting challenge is, we started Ironport almost 8-10 years ago when cloud was, still something that Rain came from.
Right.
And the truth is, though, that, the explosion of cloud computing right now and the demand that customers are having for securing what they're doing in the cloud doesn't change from what they're doing in their own private data centers. And so if it's firewalling and access management or vulnerability scanning or account management or anything like that, they still need all of that functionality, but the traditional ways of doing it are either challenged or don't work. And so CloudPassage is focused on solving that and providing, basically everything you need to secure your cloud servers in a way that works in that new operating environment.
Okay, so cool. So we'll jump into CloudPassage in just a little bit. So before I get into that, like I said, we should have dove into security a lot more throughout the last year for whatever reason. So when I talk to companies, when I'm out at events, when I read survey data, security is always like top 1, top 2 biggest issues for people. And then the thing that's always weird to me, listening to some people who know what they're talking about in security, is there's always this: it's never good enough. It's never, it's not secure enough. That can be broken. What inherently is good, working well in security today, and then what kind of is really, really different when people start talking about cloud that you have to go, oh, okay, I see why they're frustrated. They're saying, that doesn't work anymore. That doesn't apply anymore.
Yeah, I see that same challenge all the time as well when I talk to customers that, I think what's nice in cloud is that people are over the hump of, not understanding what it is and they get it. Yep. And even to the point now, people really have decided that they've got business use cases for it. Now, 2012 is all about how are we actually going to do it. And like you said, security is kind of number one there.
Right.
But it's such a concern because this is a whole new set of technology. It's new kind of ownership and operating models and all those kinds of things, and those two issues really feed on itself. But that's happened for all evolutions in technology. I think the security guys are always the first ones to say no, don't do that. But the truth is that if there's business value in it, that will be overcome. Salesforce overcame that with some of a company's most valuable data, their customer data.
Right.
Consumerization and mobile is a wave that I don't think any security guy thinks he can stop now. Even though security professionals are by definition risk adverse, they're now being pushed by the business to be much more enablers than really governors. And I think that's kind of a shift in IT in general over the past several years.
Okay, so that actually is a good lead in. So I think what you're saying is, the security guys, the people who do security all the time, have a good sense of like, okay, for any situation, I could lay out for you what's a good security model, a good security process, and so forth. But the challenge they typically have is by the time somebody asks them that question, they're typically like, I'd like to also go 1,000 miles an hour with this new technology or this new business model. Please build the airplane while it's starting to take off. The reason I reached out to you was a couple of reasons. One, having some background at Ironport, which I know from having been at Cisco and how well those guys have done. But the other thing that was sort of interesting is you guys, in essence, are doing at a really high level sort of security as a service for cloud servers. and the thing that was kind of, to me, kind of clicked to the light bulb moment was, I said, okay, if that's the premise, where the security guys sort of, generally know what to do, but they're always behind a little bit because, by the time the business wants to do it, it's let's get going, and the security guys go, we're going to get bolted on. You guys are there to say, look, we're sort of ahead of the game, right? You want to start deploying stuff to the cloud. We've got this ready-made service. Is that a fair assessment of kind of where you guys add value in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. The way that we really position ourselves is that it's security that enables cloud adoption today.
Okay.
But separately from CloudPassage, let me just talk about kind of the broader security challenges and why there's questions around how do we secure cloud, those kinds of things. First of all, thanks. Ironport was awesome. I'm glad that's seen in many places, and the work that we did afterwards with the broader network and security, content security portfolios, it really spoke to the fact that security is not a specific product or technology. Security is not a firewall. Security is not, an AV scanner. It's a way of thinking and a set of processes and systems that work together. And customers are demanding those security capabilities for the cloud, but the problem is that the old ways don't work.
Okay. Expand on that a little bit. What's broken?
Sure. So I think that the obvious stuff that anyone listening to this podcast would know is that obviously you don't have network access and there's no perimeter that you can secure. Okay. And so when you're taking your servers from your private data center and throwing them in the cloud, it's taking that security blanket, to use a pun, and you've thrown that server naked up into the cloud. And so that's an architectural challenge. And I think that Chris Hoff, or a lot of people know him as Beaker, he and I worked together for quite a while, and he had a great blog post over a year and a half ago that was entitled "The Security Hamster Sine Wave of Pain: Public Cloud and the Return to Host-Based Protection." And it just speaks to the fact that you can't do things the old way, but there's also a lot of challenges that are beyond just the architectural issue that you don't have access to the network or a perimeter, but the fact that in the cloud, it's very, very common for your server farm to rapidly grow and shrink. So there's this whole problem of elasticity. There's also the problem that in the cloud, compute is a metered resource. It's not a scarce resource, but you get charged, based on the size of your server. And so it's no longer that you've got a whole bunch of extra CPU cycles you can just burn, kind of scanning and scanning and scanning. And also really, really challenging, and something that a lot of IT guys still haven't wrapped their heads around, is that the clouds, the servers in the clouds move, not just among data centers and one provider, but they move to different providers, they move into private clouds, all those kinds of things. So the challenges of the change of the servers, the fact that you have now a different way of thinking about how you're paying for your resources, and you have a different way of thinking about where they live, that's a big challenge that people are just starting to understand from the security problems with. Okay,
so you've got like you said, the sort of the moat that used to be around the data center or around your servers sort of goes away because you can't look at it anymore, you can't see it. You're dealing with a resource that potentially moves around, which means, okay, do my policies move with them? How do I adapt to things moving around? And then you've got the challenge of the resource themselves. Security fundamentally is a computational function, so it's expensive from a CPU perspective. People didn't really think about that. I don't want to say they didn't think about it, but they didn't feel like they were paying for it in the past, and right. now that it's metered, you're paying for it. Okay, so you've got those kind of fundamental challenges, and so CloudPassage comes along. How do you guys address that? I think what was neat when I looked at it, but help people understand this. When I looked at it, it's a very holistic way of looking at it. It's not just one product. It's not just one feature. It's kind of a very holistic way of doing it. How do you guys address all those things?
No, so yeah, thanks for recognizing that. I really do view that we are a platform for adding these security functionalities on top. Because, like I said earlier, security is not just a firewall. It's not just vulnerability scanning. It's all those things taken together. And so, what we do, we focus on the platform, and we built a platform that is elastic and scalable and portable. So we built something that could run in the cloud and handle all those challenges we just talked about, and then we add security capabilities on top of that. Another thing that's very, very interesting, and so we do the firewall, the access management, the vulnerability scanning, account management, all that kind of stuff. But we also provide visibility and a lot of security information about the cloud, the environment that you're actually running in. And what I mean by this is that a host-only tool can't tell you if a cloned instance of that host pops up in a different country or in someone else's data center. But we can. We can tell you if someone, has used your Amazon account to spin up a server that you didn't authorize. Okay. And we can tell you what's going on with your instances, where they're running those kinds of things. And that's something that goes beyond anything that a traditional security person has thought about, because the only way to get a server in and out of a data center used to be very, very tightly accessed physically. Now people can, through an API call, spin up new servers in completely different places, and so we watch that. And so those things, doing the traditional security needs in a cloud-friendly way with visibility both to the servers and to the cloud it's running in is the holistic solution that we've got there.
Okay, so and for people that aren't familiar with it, obviously go to the website. Some very cool videos, but I think when I looked at it, you guys, so there's a service that does monitoring of the servers that you kind of inventory. So if I'm a customer, I come to you, I say, here's an inventory of the servers that I'm going to spin up. You guys, you do some basic kernel level software that gets installed, or daemon level software that gets installed. So. But I think what you just said sounds very, very interesting. So not only do you monitor the servers that I give you an inventory of, but you sort of do kind of the equivalent of like what credit card companies do, which is like identity monitoring, so that if something that looks like my server is operating somewhere else in the world, maybe using my identity, maybe trying to collect credit cards on behalf of me, you guys at least have some visibility to that?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's powerful.
And the reason, it's basically because of our architecture. So there's a daemon that gets installed in your server instance. So whenever one of your servers pops up, it will register. That daemon will register with our grid. We call it the Halo computing grid. And so we run that. And Halo is the whole system, and the grid is what keeps track of all the daemons. So we actually create that inventory for you, and you can create alerts as to when servers pop up, those kinds of things. That's one of our really useful features there. And so then the combination of the daemons running on all your servers and the grid is how we've provided visibility into your systems, but also visibility to your broader cloud environment as well. Okay,
cool. And this is for, I know when I looked at like the set of partners you guys have, it's all public cloud providers right now. It's Rackspace and GoGrid and Amazon. Could this potentially also be extended to people who want to build a private cloud environment? Yes. Or is that not there yet today?
Oh yeah, no. So we're completely agnostic into what environment you're running this in. You can run this in any public cloud. We work. It's a Linux daemon. We've actually got Windows coming out at the end of this year, because that's surprisingly becoming pretty high traction in the cloud. And so the daemon gets installed, and then you run it anywhere. Public clouds, any of the providers you mentioned, private clouds, anything people are doing with any kind of virtualization stack. We also have people running this on bare metal. And the benefit of being able to run in all those different form factors is we can give the security operators a single unified view of everything going on every server, regardless of where it's running.
Okay. So that's cool. And all this is as a sort of on a monitored as a service basis. So based on how many servers I'm using on a monthly basis or a usage basis, correct?
Right. Well, the basic version is free, actually.
Oh, okay.
So anyone can go to the website, register, and get set up in about 5 minutes. And our basic functionality is free for people to spin up, and it's very, very usable. It's not just a trial. That's like really important security functionality. And then we have a professional version, which is metered by the server hour, just like Amazon would do. And that has a lot of really useful things like two-factor authentication, being able to get API access to the system, as well as extended storage of your security data.
Okay. So very cool. So I was playing around with the numbers, and like you said, there's in the professional version there's a metered service, and so I was doing the typical thing, throw in some numbers, and I think I threw in let's say 500 servers, which isn't a huge environment, but it's not a tiny environment, and it came out to be something in the range of I don't know $25,000 to $35,000 a month, right? And so I went, okay, that's a number. One of the things I've heard before around security, and again, it's not in my DNA, so I ask dumb questions, so I apologize. How do that works out to say, I don't know, $300,000 a year, which is, maybe the equivalent of two people, kind of all in, or three people, depending on what you're paying for or whatever. Like, what's a good way for people to measure, like, how much of my budget should be towards IT security? Is there a way to put a percentage on it? How do you measure risk against that? Is that something that's commonly talked about in the security industry?
Yeah, definitely, and I think that model is also something that's changing as people start getting more used to utility and metered billing in cloud, for example. And so, where our pricing metric, basically server hours, is exactly the same as Amazon would charge you for when you're running your servers,
right?
And those are fairly expensive as well,
right?
The way that most customers really look at how they justify security spend boils down to their risk. Their first of all, how much compliance do they have to maintain? If you're in a regulated industry, you're obviously going to have to spend more on security. Going back to the earlier discussion about security teams have been tasked much more of being more enablers as well as managing costs. There's I know a lot of companies that will say, well, we really want to focus on enabling the business, but we also need to cut costs out of existing business, or let's grow the business, run the business, that kind of thing. And then there's just core risk management. And so if, for example, you are a really important consumer brand where being compromised would significantly impact your overall business, then you're going to be much more willing to spend and manage that risk. I've had customers tell me that the CSO said the single most important thing the CEO measures me against is like, do we ever get our name in the papers for a security violation?
Right, something like
fire.
Yeah, like he doesn't want to be the guy from Sony PlayStation or what was going on earlier in the year.
Yeah, I mean, in general, overall security spending is usually 8 to 14% of overall IT spending, depending on the vertical that people are in.
Okay.
And really, it's customers have to determine, what they want to do. I would say, frankly, that when you look at all the different functionality that we're covering and all the different piece parts people have to do to bring that together in a traditional data center, and the operational overhead of trying to do that in the cloud, it's actually pretty much a bargain.
Okay. Yeah, and again, when I threw the numbers out there, I was just trying to get a sense of it in terms of people, and I went, well, 500 people. If you had a person and a half or two people that, I mean, in essence, you guys are giving them the most updated skills, the most updated sort of technology, I would assume. That seems, like you said, very, very reasonable, if not sort of a steal to some extent. So.
And remember the basic version's free too.
Yeah, that's true. So, kind of follow-up question on that. You mentioned a little bit about your background, having been at Ironport and some other places. We were talking offline about the people that are over at CloudPassage having background at RSA and some of the other places that are very, very well-known security places. In the networking space, the people that typically you can trust, and people will think this is going to come across biased, but I mean, in general, the best engineers at some point have worked for Cisco or Juniper, or back in the day, say it was Wellfleet, or I mean, there's sort of a core set of places where the best from some segment come from. Is that the same with the security? I mean, when somebody says, okay, new company like CloudPassage comes up, does a huge part of the trust factor come from where those people have come from, that they've been through really hard security problems before, or how does that world work?
Great question, and it's actually kind of a loaded question, because I think there are definitely important things that people learn with the way security customers think and security operators think.
Yep.
But I think that there's also sometimes a lot of risk in doing things the way they've been done before,
okay.
Because that can stifle innovation. And so So something that I think is interesting, you use some examples of some companies where a good engineer has been through the ringer at, one of these network companies. Well, in the cloud, we're not, networking's done. Like everything we're doing is at the OS and the application layer. And so for us, having, people that are really good at building scalable platforms, scalable SaaS-based platforms is important. The security background we have is really critical, and I think brings a ton of value to our customers in the content of the security data that we provide. So, we have full scanning of any vulnerability that may be published of all the software packages you have installed. And we take that information and we provide, the checks and the remediation for that, which is very, very valuable to a customer. Additionally, when it comes to innovating in security and looking at, how do we, instead of having a static firewall that, you have to create a allow rule for every new server, can we think about that differently? And for example, one of the things we do is that as you add new servers, like as you add new web servers, we will automatically update the database servers to know that those web servers exist, or if they've been taken down, that they don't exist, and to think through that and to provide that elasticity. And so you've got to definitely understand the critical parts of security that the customers care about. You've got to, there's a lot of value in thinking about different ways that we've innovated in security. But just like what cloud's doing to every other market, in many ways you also have to rethink the way you're doing things.
Okay, so it's more than just saying, hey, we've got great algorithms. I think what you're trying to say is, look, cloud operates a lot differently. I mean, virtualization made things operate differently. Clouds, it's how are things interconnected that maybe we didn't. Different groups thought about that before. This is applications are interconnected. They're interconnected across clouds. They've got dependencies on where data comes from. So that's probably, I think what you're saying is that's just as important as sort of the core pieces of the security, whether it's encryption or access lists or other things like authentication.
Right. Okay. I mean, we really exist at this really interesting intersection of security and cloud, or, to use a buzzword, DevOps.
Okay.
And if you think back to, you guys did a great episode earlier this year with Nick Weaver on DevOps, where basically you're talking about people are rethinking IT and the way that they do that. And so, like I said, it's the security content and the capabilities there is really, really critical. And that's what you can't just go out and buy those guys for $150,000 a year, like you were talking about. Like, those guys are really, really expensive.
Yeah.
So that's why security companies exist, is to package that up and provide that expertise. But then you've got to make that work in a world where you've got the challenges of elasticity and scalability and portability.
Okay. So you guys, I'll sort of try and wrap this up a little bit. This has been very, very helpful, very interesting. So you guys recently were named in InfoWeek or Network World. I got to look at where it was, but sort of one of the sort of 5 most interesting security vendors to watch. And when I went and looked at the list, obviously you guys have a way of delivering what you do. It's a software as a service based thing. It's a combination of host based plus a very centralized monitoring. You had other companies on there like HighTrust who are about being focused on virtualization in the servers. You had a few other people doing some different things. Is there I guess this gets back to your point about you got to think about things differently. If you're talking to customers about these changes and these new challenges, is there a better way or a more applicable way to be thinking about security for cloud than maybe it was in the past? I mean, how do you have that conversation when they're still getting bombarded with network-based security functions, which obviously Cisco is doing and you have some background in, or you have Symantec or Intel talking about doing hardware root of trust. How do security people make sense of where's the right place to put it? Where's it overkill? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, that is a great question. Actually, it's frankly one of the reasons that I was really excited to be able to have this discussion with you and for this audience, is that in traditional data centers, security has been something that has been handled by a different group, and so the people running the servers and the people doing development didn't have to think about it. And one of the real risks that I see that the entire cloud industry is having is that as you have, people who are not necessarily security conscious moving from private data center operations into public cloud operations, they just have not developed an appreciation for the importance of security. And so regardless of the way that you're doing it, there's a huge education that needs to happen amongst all of us that are starting to use these new IT models, in that, look, security is really important, and whether you were involved in it or not, you had a level of security in your previous operational model that just doesn't exist in the cloud. And so you need to think about how you're going to solve that.
Okay.
And that, I think, is when I'm at trade shows, when I'm talking to people, at different events, and they say, well, doesn't Amazon do this for me? They're blown away when, frankly, the answer is no. Like, Amazon is extremely explicit in their terms of service that there is a shared responsibility model where they're handling the network, the compute storage, and the hypervisor, but every other aspect of security, which very often would be done in a network-based way in a private data center, they are not responsible for, and they say explicitly the customer must address that.
Gotcha. So I'm going to throw one last question at you, because it just sort of popped in my mind, and we were talking about it a little bit earlier. When you're talking about security, and we were talking about like Sony PlayStation or somebody getting bad reputation. When we start talking about moving things to the public cloud explicitly, right? You get back to that level of trust with the provider, or level of trust with the people providing the service to you. Risk is obviously a piece of security that people get concerned about, whether it's lost data or downtime or whatever. And this is more sort of a question for you to make a prediction, and tell me you don't want to deal with it if you don't want to. Do you see a time when people look at this and they go, I got to start not only thinking about from risk from downtime, but like think about insurance that goes with that, or like how do I monetize? How do I put a value on being down for 6 days, or being losing certain amounts? I mean, is that because there are no SLAs today that are going to recoup people for anything more than downtime? But do you see that evolving over time, where it's like there's got to be a financial resolution back to somebody, or will the market evolve to that?
Well, so there's two parts to that question. One is what exactly are you protecting against? Are you, traditionally protecting the data, safeguarding intellectual property? But then your question is around, another top of mind for any security professional, which is, mitigating brand risk,
right.
Because downtime is hugely risky in brands. It's a good question. Is what will the market do? Will service providers start creating SLAs and people will flock there? Or I think one of the things that we've already seen happen, and in fact, there's been some great conversations on this podcast around, look, if you're building in the cloud, you've got to realize some of these systems are going to go down, and you've got to architect for that.
Yeah.
What was it called? The Amazon apocalypse that happened earlier this year got people really thinking about, well, these guys went down because they were, really kind of single homed in a single Amazon area versus, Netflix didn't go down. And they've done plenty of other things to their brand lately, but like one thing they have been is solidly reliable,
right,
based on the architecture of their site.
Okay, so big potential place for evolution, but not people get, like you said, it gets back to what are you trying to do, which I think a lot of times is the question people always ask with security. It's like, well, is it secure? And you kind of have to say, well, what do you want that to be? It could be a lot of things. So
SLA, I mean, some providers do have SLAs. You can go and you can get cloud hosting in a provider with SLA, just like you can get an SLA on something that you're hosting in a data center like Equinox or something like that.
Yep.
But no right-minded IT person I know or ops person I know, thinks that an SLA is actually going to keep their site up, and so they're planning for reliability and redundancy. They just know that the SLA is there to make them whole financially when something does go wrong.
Okay. Yep. Well, very cool. Well, I think we're sort of running out of time. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been fun talking about sort of the ins and outs of security. I think the way that CloudPassage goes about doing it is a very cool way of going to market. People can try it out for free. They can use it for free. They can take advantage of your security expertise on a per fee basis, and you guys are winning awards. So obviously you're doing something right to where people think we can trust you for security. We want to kind of expand our business. So that's very, very cool. Thank you for coming on the show.
Very cool. Thanks, Brian. This has been great.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up. We're out of time for this week. Thanks to Rand and for everybody for listening. You can follow us on Twitter at @thecloudcastnet. You can reach us at thecloudcast.net on the web. You can find links to the show, leave us a comment, send us an email, or you can stream the show on Stitcher. So thanks to everybody for listening, and have a great weekend.